There we go. Hello, everybody. Really excited to host the Neurotech Day along with ALS ONE, and many of you who are joining me today. I really welcome you, and no further ado, let me get started here. And joining me today are my team members. If you hear from Christian Rubio or Kristen Hatcher or Steffi Hens, they are my team, and we'll all chip in throughout our presentation. And let me. And as I said, we will do the first 3 hours. The first half is going to be hosted by Everything ALS and Team Gleason. Blair has joined me here, and we will be heading to talk about the first hour and a half about everything ALS, citizen-driven research with open innovation. And I'm joined here by Dr. Leigh Hochberg, who is also our scientific advisor, and Steve Kowalski, who is going to be talking about from the research participant perspective, and also Roseanne Hickman. And we have Elad Yamtau from Israel, who is also one of our researchers who's worked with us, and to talk about the recent publication using search engine data. And the second half of the section, we will have presentations from the industry leaders. And I'm sure we all have a lot of questions on AI and the safety, the security, the future, and how are we building AI responsibly. And those are going to be covered by our partners. With no further ado, let me talk a little bit about everything ALS and what we have done. We believe in citizen-driven research with open innovation. I know it's a mouthful. And what does that mean? For us, what it means is that bringing people in to work together and doing it in a collaborative way. When we say collaboration, it doesn't have to be consensus-based. It's agile and speed. So that's what we focus on: agile, quick iteration, and speed. And I'll talk a little bit more about how we have built this. And to start off with, this is always possible only from the industry leaders as they come together. And I'm so fortunate to have Leigh Hochberg, who's joined us, and we'll talk a little deeper dive into working with us and what we have done. But, we work with our supporting team, Ernest Frankel from MIT, James Berry from MGH, Kelly Norrell from IBM, and also Alex Sherman from MGH. So this is the team that's actually supporting a lot of the function. Like I said, representing this group. Lyle will talk a little bit more in deeper detail about what we have done. And also our consortium members. We have many of the companies, large companies, small biotech companies, who've joined hands with us to actually develop this citizen-driven research with open innovation platform. And I have a quick, video on to kick this off today, and then we will go a little more deeper into what everything ALS does. So let me. Hi, I'm Indu Navar. I'm a Silicon Valley tech entrepreneur, a mother, a wife, and most recently, CEO and founder of a nonprofit, Everything ALS, in honor of my dear husband.
From the time a patient notices something's wrong to diagnosis is typically 12 months.
In a disease where people might live 3 years, basically a third of their time is spent going to different doctors.
Resulting from the clinical trials on ALS, so far, there is only one drug that extends the life of a patient by around 3 months.
Frankly, right now, clinical trials use very bad measurements to monitor progression of disease.
This is a clinical diagnosis. There's not a blood test that says you have ALS.
Digital biomarkers could be useful in two critical ways: tracking progression and early diagnosis.
What we know for sure is that this is a lot of different diseases. We know that we have to do the right treatments in the right patients. Everybody talks about collaborating and working together and sharing things. There's not a sort of an infrastructure that fosters that in a meaningful way.
Having a neurodegenerative disease is really awful because it affects how you think, how you move. A lot of people will have it. So if we can do something, I mean, it will have a huge impact.
The sheer number of people that are going to develop a neurodegenerative disease in the next 10 years was going to basically bankrupt our country. It's like extraordinary what's going on in ALS. We've never had so much going on in terms of therapies in development. Brain health is now kind of the hot topic in the neurosciences.
We're beginning to see that some of the biomarkers that we've worked on for many years are becoming useful in clinical trials.
We're reaching an inflection point for digital biomarkers. The sensor technology is already there. Consumer electronics routinely measure breathing, movement, and speech. If we can couple those technologies with right analytics, we'll have a huge impact.
We have successfully brought in patient community and many researchers and pharmaceutical companies collaborating together. We're using technology innovations such as data science and artificial intelligence to accelerate finding treatments and a cure for this disease.
So as you heard, what we have built is Everything ALS digital platform, and underlying that, we really follow this agile methodology to get the speed of innovation, which is citizen-driven research. And I'll talk a little bit about, what is citizen-driven research for us means, and care to cure. And we believe that caring for the people with ALS, as I've had personal experience going through as a caregiver, and for my husband who got diagnosed in 2018 and passed away in late 2019, really caring, and that is what is going to help us bring the cure, is very important. And open innovation fosters collaboration and also iterative learning with course correction. That is the agility to having feedback loop. And we also have super user evaluation, which I think Steve will talk a little bit more about, how we involve in the co-creation process with the participants in research, with the people living with ALS, and where we decide a go or a no-go for many of these initiatives that we work on. And I'll talk a little bit more about, what is the current state when we started, and why does Everything ALS exist? We exist to solve a problem that we saw that can be solved with using advanced technology. So the siloed approach that was leading to a lot of questions for the participants, for people living with ALS, with a lot of different disease, with a lot of different studies, was really creating many disaggregated data sources. So with Everything ALS, what we have is, what we built was the citizen-driven research approach, where Everything ALS community works together with different sensor companies. And we have the ability to have the super users work with each other, and all of the data goes both ways into the database. And then we have neurologists, scientists who actually work with our data science team, and Leigh will talk a little bit more about it. And then we have the pharmaceutical companies with clinical trials, and our goal is to really come up with what is clinically meaningful outcome for clinical trials. And this agile and results-driven approach that we have taken is really creates a fast approach to creating AI technologies and bringing this whole ecosystem together. So again, our core theme is care to cure. And today you will hear from different people in our community who will actually speak to this approach and how we are doing this different research. Our different digital biomarker research is in speech. Sorry, it's the Google that takes time to load. So we have a speech and facial video study, which we have done data collection, digital biomarker. Let me reset here. What I see is not what you're seeing. So with our digital biomarker research, we have done our speech and video collection. This started about in 2002. And we are well our way, and we'll talk a little bit more about the results from it. And also we have what we call Radcliffe study, which is a multimodal study with walking, breathing, and speech with different partners with Oral Analytics, FeedMe, and Zapharex, all integrated into one app. And also we're kicking off the pre-symptomatic study that is people who have gene carriers and doing the early diagnosis. And what we have built is, this is a platform. We have taken an approach of it's easy to integrate new technologies into this platform, and the ability for us to take this complicated process, complex data structures, and building intuitive solution, and also one single place that we can actually have all of the data residing. And also the real benefit of the citizen-driven research is our ethnic diversity and geographic diversity. When we looked at our 800 plus participants in our study, which is the speech and video collection, as you can see, we actually are very, organically, this is organically without much effort, we were actually tracking to the US Census in terms of Caucasian, as you can see, Asian population, and even the sub categories of Native Hawaiian or American Indian population, and the Hispanic population. And yes, we do need to do a little bit more work on trying to make sure that we can get the diversity in the Black and African community, African American community, and we will be working on more focused efforts on it. But I would say that this was organically grown, and we were very excited to see even the geographic distribution. We actually have participants from all 52 states. So I'll do a really quick app demo on how everything ALS app works. This is less than 3 minutes, and then we'll kick it off into going into the detail. So I just wanted to show you how this, our Everything ALS app is really integrating all of the different aspects. And for example, we brought in generative AI. We do have expert talk series that many of you have actually come in and spoken in Everything ALS platform. And we have used the data and used ChatGPT to look at where the patients or the community can come in and ask simple questions. For example, taking Healy ALS platform, I pretty much asked the question, is the trial, enrolling? And with the simple question, it really is looking at the data that we have fed the data from the presentations. As you can see, yes, the trial is enrolling, and there are 50 sites in 2020, and there is added about 20 more. And there's a lot more detail about what it can gather from the presentation. And how can I enroll in this study? Again, these are the questions that are in the trial, the patients usually ask. And this will actually have the generative AI looking at the information, actually comes in and gives a very concrete answers. And I think I have another question that we can ask, which is, when will this be, when will the results be announced? As you can see, it's results be published. And the result is, as we should expect the generative AI to not make up false answers, is it will say, I am not sure, if it's not discussed in the content that we fed. Again, it's walled off. We're not giving it external content. It's only looking at the content that we have given. Also we a little bit about the studies that we have, and this is kind of the UI. The patients will have the ability to connect their own wearable devices, and also look at the studies, the Radcliffe study, where there is different aspects, which has got speech, breathing, and also walking, and they can start a session through this. And it's all in one place, and it's integrated into other apps, like, the other apps. And there's also the motor movement exam. There is going to be a little bit more. Lyle is going to talk about it. And also there is something called daily journal summary, where the patient community will come in and add daily what are the symptoms that they're actually going through. And that data is used for the care and also for the research as well. So that is the quick demo. And if you want to know more, and if you're interested in learning more about it, please let us know. We are always happy to give you more. So with that, I'm going to invite Dr. Ostro, and I've had a great pleasure of working with Lyle in the last, I think I would say, over 2 years now. And today, I think Lyle does not need any introduction. I think many of you already know Lyle is a neurologist and also a scientific advisor for everything ALS, and co-PI in Radcliffe study, which is a multimodal study. And he has recently joined Temple University. I should say recently, because it's, I think, almost 1 year now. So Lyle will talk about, from his perspective as being a scientific advisor, as a team member, as a researcher, what is his involvement, and how we are driving the agile and results driven in ALS. With that, Lyle, welcome.
Thank you. Let's see if I can share my slide screen. Hold on. Can you see my screen right now?
It says, yes, it is coming up. Yes.
It's there? The
Yes.
big one? The right way? Okay, cool. Okay. So yeah, thank you, Indu. So you guys asked me to kind of talk about how I became involved, but then what we're doing now and how this is working. And, I think the way I became first involved with everything ALS is similar to the way a lot of people I know became involved, which is that you guys asked me to give a talk, and this was a while ago, right? And I get asked to give this kind of talk not infrequently, because I'm involved with a bunch of different collaborative efforts in the ALS research landscape. So I chair the Department of Defense ALS research program, the programmatic panel, which provides funding for therapy development, translational IND enabling studies. I also run a postmortem tissue core that works with researchers around the country. I'm part of the ALS Hope Foundation, other efforts. And so, I get asked to give this kind of a talk, like how can we work better, work together to give talks or to develop therapies. And so this was how I met Indu and met Everything ALS. And, when I give those kinds of talks, I often start talking about Jack Griffin. So Dr. Griffin, he's passed away, but he was the chair of neurology at Hopkins when I was a medical student and visited and spent time in his clinic. And then he was, my mentor when I was a resident. And, he wrote this editorial quite some time ago now, 2006, talking about troubles in translating diseases in ALS. And in particular, calling out, that there's advocacy groups and foundations and people living with the disease and scientists, and that we're all frustrated and we got to find ways to make this happen faster and work faster. And, even though he wrote this in 2006, if you read it today, you'd say, yes, this is what we need to do. And he talks about ways to share data and not have IP concerns and have this unfettered exchange of ideas and data. And, it's a little frustrating that this was written in 2006, right? Because this is still what we struggle with today. But it's hard to do, and it's hard to do in a meaningful way. It's easy to talk about collaborating and, we're going to work together, but what does it really look like? And I'll tell you, the thing that I personally think has changed the most over the past even just 2-3 years is this citizen-driven, engagement of all aspects, whether it's people living with a disease, scientists, clinicians, and it's real, and it changes and evolves every day. And, as an example of that, I mean, this is a conference, as I understand, ALS ONE and everything ALS. And yesterday you heard from, I think, not yesterday, on Friday, from Fernando from TDI. And I gave a similar talk to TDI about a year ago, but specifically talking about how everyone's working together. And I think this really exemplifies it. And, TDI and everything ALS are sharing data, and the foundations are working together. We're all in the sandbox together. We're all finding ways to work together. I will say that for the Department of Defense ALS research program, anyone who gets a grant from us, a clinical trial grant, anything that involves people living with the disease, part of that proposal has to be people with lived experience. There has to be a foundation. There have to be people, living with a disease, caregivers, as part of the planning and the execution of those proposals. And data sharing is required, and data sharing is scored. And these are all the kinds of things that are being driven by citizens, by this community, by people saying nothing about us without us, better together. And that was my experience when I first joined this group. And I have to tell you, just as a quick pitch, we have to stop talking about a research pipeline, right? Because the fact is, this idea of a pipeline is a hollow tube that connects two things. And this is the old model. This is when there was a scientist in lab who had an idea and worked on, this idea for a while. And then once it was ready, it got presented, and eventually, IND enabling studies, whatever it might be, gets to clinical trial. And there was no engagement with the environment, with the community. In fact, pipelines are kind of an eyesore. I also don't like the one in the bottom right there, that's idea like a pipeline is a hollow tube that's about to crash on you. That's bad too. So we have to come up with some other way to talk about drug development in ALS, because we're the opposite of this, right? We are not a closed tube. We are all engaged. So, they say like, you made it when you see your name or your face in lights on Broadway, something like that. I don't know. But as Indu mentioned, when I joined, that one of the things that I do for everything ALS is I'm the co-PI with Indu for the Radcliffe study. This picture here on the right, so that's me in the very tiny bottom there, and this is like this middle row. I think this is the data team guys who we have a Zoom with every week, and there's other scientists. This is just a small number of the innumerable people that are involved in this process. And so we have these Zooms every week, right, with the data science people, with the people doing running the trials. And one of the things I noticed right away with this, so the Radcliffe is combining all these different measures, right? Smart shoe soles and, Bluetooth measures of respiration and speech and videos of, movement and all sorts of different kinds of data. And if I was doing this on my own as an academic researcher, or maybe with a bunch of centers, I'd submit an IRB and it would get approved and we'd have to run this study. And then we'd realize, oh, we really screwed up. I wish we did it this way. Man, I wish we could go back in time and do this a little different. Why did everybody drop out? What happened? And the way that this works in this ecosystem is the opposite of that. So every week things are evolving, things are being refined. We're able to get updates to IRB protocols very quickly. We had a problem with the pulmonary data, for example. And so what did we do? Because of this community, we had experts in how to do the pulmonary measurements the right way, pulmonologists who work with these sorts of spirometers. We held Zoom meetings. We figured out the best way to train people living with the disease, the best way to train the people who help them when they're doing the study, and rolled that out and made sure the data was what it needed to be. Silly little things, these Bluetooth shoe soles, they need to be near a phone. We had these pouches that people in the study wore around their waist when they were in the study. But then we realized people living with ALS have trouble working the zippers on the pouches. And so we replaced the pouches with something you hang around your neck that holds the phones in it. Just that kind of a little change in a normal study like that would take months to get your protocols approved and reapproved. And the way this is set up, it happens quickly. And we get data. So, there's this unbelievable data set, and it's being shared and it's being used from these different studies. The one thing that we wanted to talk about today a little bit is the speech data. And so we have all this recordings of people speaking, doing these different tasks. Right now, the only ways that we have to measure speech really in an ALS clinical trial is this speech subset of the ALS FRSR, and it's 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, normal, not quite normal. If you repeat yourself, I can understand you. If you repeat yourself and wave your arms and point at things, I can understand you, or I can't understand you, right? And that's it. And that's really not a very granular way to tell if somebody's changing, and it doesn't fit our needs. And we need better tools, and we need tools to detect subtle changes. And, as an example, this is somebody who was scored as normal. And, you can hear that person's speech is clearly not normal. The reason they were scored as normal is that a lot of studies use what's called a self-reported ALS FRSR, and people and their caregivers can understand themselves perhaps better than others. But even when it's done in the clinic, it's not a very granular scale. So, all these smart sciencey tech data people who we meet with every week, they're busy analyzing this data, and you hear about AI, machine learning, all this fun stuff, right? And trying to figure out how you can predict how people are going to progress, and are there clusters, and using all these fancy algorithms and different aspects of speech, things like how fast are you speaking, like I speak really fast, or how easy is it to understand somebody, or what's the tone, or is there nice melody to the speech. There's all sorts of different stuff that can be used in these models to have computers then figure out how somebody's progressing over time. And the idea is that you'd like to have some measure based on these granular computer-driven algorithms that can detect changes, very small changes over time, say in a clinical trial, perhaps to tell us before a trial, to take some data on somebody and say, are they going to progress fast or slow, right? So that you can predict somebody's performance, or predict the slope of change, so you can tell if you give them a drug, does it change that? But here's the problem, right? Like, how do you know you're measuring something meaningful? And how do you know that what you're measuring, that if I tell you that this is a sensitive measure, how do you know? How do you believe me? And what can we compare it to? And so what can we say that, yes, we're measuring something reliably, repeatably, that it matters, that it's, a true valid measure. And like my analogy when I first thought of these slides was, it's sort of like, we're building an airplane and we don't have anything to compare it to, because the ALS FRSR is like dropping a rock off of a cliff. It's just that blunt. And I like, this was, so Ernest Frankel, this is his analogy, which is better than mine, which is, if you think about when they made the first thermometers, right? How did they prove that the thermometer was measuring something that was meaningful when all they had to compare it to was like, oh, do I have a fever? Let me put my hand on my forehead. And that's kind of where we were. And so in talking about how to get this as a useful clinical outcome, and talking about, thinking about going to the FDA and talking about experts, and this was something we just started discussing in November of last year, right? And so what do we do? And how do we decide if something is clinically meaningful? And so, my experience, like in other types of medicine, science, so I read muscle and nerve pathology. If you want to make a scale to score something, what you do is you get a bunch of experts in a room and you say, okay, what are the existing methods that have been published? Let's take them all. Let's get some samples. Let's decide, like, how do we want to score them? Mild, moderate, severe, whatever it might be. And then we'll go out, we'll all score a set of, samples, and then we'll come back and we'll say, hey, how'd you score this one? How'd you score this one? And we'll see if we can come up with some rules. And this is kind of an iterative process. And then maybe we'll go back and do that again and revise it and try and define what's mild, moderate, severe. And maybe we'll send it to other experts. And this takes a long time, right? Over a very long time trying to develop these sorts of scales. And we didn't want to do that. We didn't want to have that kind of time. So what is it that we want to measure? So, we're talking about speech, right? What is it that matters about speech? What matters about speech is, can you be understood? Can somebody understand what you're saying? That's the clinically meaningful outcome. And so if we wanted to figure out who are the experts who could help us decide whether somebody can be understood, that's speech pathologists, right? And because we have this citizen-driven research, because we have this community, we have access to speech and language pathologists who work in our ALS clinics. And this is, that's what they do for a living. They spend their time taking care of people with ALS, analyzing their speech, seeing how they are talking, seeing if they can be understood and how they can be helped to be understood. And so we gathered together. So Jordan Green is a SOP, also a researcher who runs a lab thinking about this kind of thing at MGH. And with his help, we designed a study, and we used speech language pathologists from 3 large ALS clinics who've been doing this for years and years and years. And we said, what methods exist? Jordan's published some. These studies took years and years to do, but they are published, and they have a bunch of different measures: intelligibility, listener effort. So we had all these measures. We then needed to find a way to quickly gather data, quickly analyze data, get a platform. And again, back to what does Everything ALS do? Well, Everything ALS has those data science people and has Swapna, who runs the platform team. And oh my gosh, I felt like we drew something on the back of a napkin, and the next week we had a platform. And, the data science guys started analyzing it that week. And each week we would have meetings with them, and they would do it differently. And, this is what science is supposed to be like. When I'm a kid and I think about how am I going to figure stuff out when I'm, a scientist, this is what it's like. It's you have ideas, you work together, you figure this stuff out quickly, and it evolves in real time. So November 22 is when we started talking about this. By January of 2023, we had an outline, an idea for the project, right? And we got Jordan Green and those SLPs agreed to participate. By June, we completed 2 independent pilot studies to refine and make this better, and then launched the real study, and the data collection was done by September. So this is what happens in this sort of an ecosystem. This is the speech data set from Everything ALS, just showing that controls and participants are well matched. This was our first pilot study. So we had the SLPs. We actually just 10 subjects. We used a bunch of different speech. So we have, people describing a picture out loud. We have this thing called a bamboo passage, which is reading a paragraph, different sentences that are standardized sentences. We used 11 different outcome measures. We didn't know what was going to work best. After this first pilot, what we realized was that a simple outcome measure that's just how hard is it to understand somebody, listener effort, scale of 0 to 100, how hard is it for me to understand what you're saying, was the one that worked the best, was reliable, was easiest. We chose which verbal tasks we were going to use from the amazing data set that we had. They made some setup recommendations. We wanted to know how reliable this was and repeatable, so we added back in 20% repetition. So our people analyzing these recordings don't know what's what. It's all done blind, but they're getting 20% of them are ones that they've heard before. We made a lot of different changes in a quick pilot study. Second pilot study, we tested it. We had this very simple platform. Basically, the SLPs log on, they put some headphones on, they listen to recordings, they move this slider from 0 to 100 to see, how much effort did it take to understand somebody. Based on the second pilot, we made a few further refinements. We added a calibration test where they had to, get calibrated on what they were scoring things, and some special headphones. And then we launched the full study. And so to give you an idea about how much data these SLPs were able to do in a very quick time, there were over 2,500 total speech samples. Each recording was rated by the 3 different SLPs. So we're talking about 7,647 individual recordings, because there were 3 of them. Each participant had different longitudinal data points. There were on average 6 sessions per participant over a year, although some of them had many more than that. So this was a lot of longitudinal data. This, by the way, in the bottom here is showing the range of effort, so 0 to 100. And what you'd like to see is that there's a good spread of the blue, which is the people in the study, of their effort. Controls were all, it's easy to understand controls, unless they talk really fast like me. So I'm probably like that person. This was a calibration that we had. I'm not going to take time to play these of different, what they sounded like at different effort levels.
Indeed, no other.
Hold on, it is playing. And so we had this very simple platform. This is, so now that we have the data back and we're starting to analyze it, these are just some examples. And so what these are 4 different people with ALS in the study. And the blue line is their bulbar subscore on the ALS-FRSR, which is 0 to 12. The red line is their effort. How hard is it to understand them? And so this is a control. This is somebody who had normal speech and their effort was normal. This is a person with ALS who, this blue line is their ALS-FRSR, what we have to compare to right now. This is over a year, right? So these are different data points over a year. And this is our effort score. That's the combination of our 3 SLPs. And what you'll notice is that this is already increasing way before, about a half a year, well, more, 0.6. So more than half a year before the current ALS-FRSR scale detects a decline. We had all of this change, and you can hear it if I play this for you. So
I could read the zip code and punches 3 numbers on his keyboard.
And then here,
I tried to put my personality over as slowly as possible.
so I think you can hear that there's a difference in how and being able to understand that person between those two recordings wasn't picked up by this very blunt scale, was picked up by how much effort does it take to understand them. You know, by the time it gets to here, you can clearly hear a difference. Much harder to understand, right? So I'm not going to play these other ones in the interest of time, but this is another example. This is somebody who on our current scale was flat for, you know, almost half a year again, and then declined and then was flat again. But our effort scale shows a much more granular, much more gradual increase. This is somebody who actually was rated as normal the whole time, and yet clearly we see a change. So we're able to pick up changes that they couldn't see. Well, hold on. Sorry, I don't know why it does this. This is just some other examples of other patients, and the different colors here are 3 different SLPs, and it's just kind of to show that, yeah, they all, you know, detected the same sort of shape for almost everybody, the same kind of change over time. And again, we're just analyzing this data now, but this is showing inter-rater reliability. So how similar were the scores of the different SLPs, and this is like, so one raters on one axis, one raters on the other axis. And so what you'd like is a straight line like here, and the, you know, so the dotted line is perfect. The red line is what we get, which is pretty darn close to perfect. There's really good reliability, really good correlations. The same thing is true for intra-rater reliability. So when they rate those repeat sessions that they had. This is interesting. This is some of the machine learning related algorithms. This is just showing that you can define clusters based on rate of progression. So you can define fast or slow progressors in speech amongst the people in this study. And that's the kind of thing that would be helpful in a clinical trial, right? To know ahead of time who might be progressing fast or slow. So that's our speech study and what we're doing with it right now. And, you know, Indu mentioned that, so a motor test. So this is Christina Fournier, another really, I mean, somebody who I love working with so much, clinician, researcher who does a lot with endpoints in ALS. And she also, I think, was introduced to this group because she gave a talk, right, on endpoints and how do we track progression. She's created this newer scale that's used in a lot of studies, this Rashbroad scale called Rhodes. More recently, she created a version of this for telemedicine called the ALS motor scale. And this is something designed for physicians like myself to do in a televisit with somebody over, you know, over video to assess their changes in motor function. And, you know, we realized that you could convert this thing into something that would work in the ALS, in the Everything ALS app, and that people could do on their own, but it would take some more instruction. And so Christina generated a version of this ALS motor scale that is designed for people living with a disease to be able to do on a phone app. We realized the instruction for the original one, which is all this, you know, clinical verbiage that we understand as clinicians, but we had to do a better job explaining it. So these are actually screen grabs from this app. And, you know, and we had a Zoom call with Christina, and we basically said, okay, Christina, show us what you want him to do. And she moved her arm and sat this way and moved her mouth. And the Everything ALS team took those and within a week made them into animations. Right. So, by the way, if you go to the Emory website where Christina works, you can click. There's written manuals and roads. These are designed for physicians for these different studies. This is what, you know, really wasn't sufficient to do this in the app. And you know, I'll just show some quick videos. This is what it looks like in the app, this motor scale. I think, so this is just showing the app. And again, some intro to instructions. And it asks you, can you squeeze your eyes? Can you seal and puff out your cheeks, right? And so we had Christina on a video call doing these things, sticking out her tongue at us and, you know, like raising her hands. And, you know, right away, they were able to generate this sort of animations, this sort of a platform, you know, that now we're going to roll out and use in patients. And so this is the way that this sort of an environment with people living with a disease, with experts, with data scientists, with platform scientists, really, really, really can do this kind of thing really fast. And I think now you're going to hear from Steve. Steve is one of the participants in some of these studies. So I will stop. Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ostro. It's my pleasure to introduce Steve Kowalski. pals and everything ALS Radcliffe participant. Steve spent 34 years in various roles at Apple. He was diagnosed with ALS in 2017 and has dedicated himself to furthering research in the ALS space, using his background and experience to raise over $200,000 for research and care, increasing data by participating in several clinical trials, and has joined many ALS organizations in various capacities to raise awareness. Thank you. Welcome, Steve.
Thank you, Kristen, and I'm happy to be here. And thank you for the team at Everything ALS, and most importantly, thank you, Jen, at ALS ONE for coordinating this effort. I'm here to talk to you about my participation in the Radcliffe study. And of course, when Indu asks you to do something, we all know you do it. And so Indu found me and asked me to participate, and I was very happy to. And I explained to her that I had been involved in many digital trials before. And since my diagnosis, I'm happy that they're available to us as patients living with ALS. I was diagnosed in 2017. And at the time, as I mentioned, there was really just one way for me to participate in clinical trials, and that was really through drug trials, of which I participated in. But as we know, patients age out of qualifying for drug trials, but many of us still really do want to participate. And studies like this allow us to continue to contribute to the science in other ways, which I think is incredibly important. I'll just say a few things about the Radcliffe study that I've come to love and enjoy, and the fact that it's easy to use, it's simple, it's remote, and most recently, they were able to put up the Radcliffe participant portal, which now allows me to take a look at the data that I've contributed over my course of being in the trial. So why is that important? Well, it's important for people like me that kind of are in the tech field and like to look at data. But more importantly, I think it provides a more longitudinal approach of what's actually happening with me. And that data, it can be used in many ways, including when I go to visit my clinic every 3 months to share that data of what has happened with me over a 3-month period that otherwise wouldn't have been captured. So I think that's important for folks like me that want to pay attention to how they're progressing with this disease. It helps make informed decisions about what are the next steps that are needed in my standard of care and treatment as we move forward. The other thing that I think I've really settled in thinking on is that digital data that we're collecting is real world data. And I think we have plenty of scientific and clinical data available to us via trials and through clinics, et cetera. But I think we have a long way to go to collect real world data. And I think digital data helps fill that gap. And I think it's the combination of the clinical data or the scientific data and the real world data that is going to get us to better treatments and ultimately to a cure. So, you know, I'm glad Lyle used analogies because I'm an analogy kind of guy myself. I was asked a few weeks ago to attend a meeting down in DC about real world data. And at the time I was asked to do that, it seemed like a heavy lift, right? A really wide subject. And so as I thought about what I was going to talk about, there was a hurricane coming up the East Coast. I live in Boston, Hurricane Leigh. And I stared at the TV and was listening to the weather forecaster talking about Hurricane Lee, and it dawned on me that there's an analogy here, and I'll share my thoughts with you. 100 years ago, we knew very little about hurricanes. They showed up, they were devastating, they killed people, and we had no warning of their existence. Fast forward today, and through the use of real-world data, through the models that technology uses, we are able to now predict a hurricane's formation in the Atlantic Ocean off the African coast before it's even a hurricane. Once it turns into a hurricane, we've studied them over the years to find out where they're going to go, what they're going to do, how strong they're going to be, the weather climate and the water temperature they're going to ride through. And today we are actually very fortunate to be able to, with great accuracy, predict where a hurricane is going to land. And within a few miles, that cone of uncertainty gets shorter and shorter as the storm approaches. And the most important part of that is we're saving people's lives. So I am hopeful over time that the cone of uncertainty that exists today with ALS follows the same kind of course that we've learned in predicting hurricanes, in that someday we will be able to not only prevent this disease, but warn people of its impendingness and headed their way. So I thank you very much for being here, and I would love to entertain any questions if there are any. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. We really appreciate you coming here and talking about your experience, and also what an inspiration. And next we will be inviting Roseanne Hickman, to also our Radcliffe participant, to speak a little bit more. And I think Steffi will do the introduction.
Yes. So Roseanne is, just like Steve, one of our very engaged and committed Everything ALS study participants. She and I meet once per week for a proctored session, and during those sessions, her particular ALS need inspired our team to investigate if the speech samples we are collecting could be put to an additional use. And now transferring to Roseanne to tell a way better story about our journey of co-creation.
Good morning. My name is Roseanne Hickman. I live on the shores of Lake Erie in Ohio, and I am living with ALS. My first symptoms of ALS started in the fall of 2021. We noticed the sporadic laughing and crying, which we all know is classified as pseudobulbar. In February 2022, I started slurring my words. My primary care physician had originally considered stroke or long COVID. When MRI and other tests came back normal, the referral to a neurologist without clear diagnosis led to an ENT at the Cleveland Clinic, which led to the immediate referral to a neuromuscular physician. By then, it was October 2022. After a few tests and conversation, she told me, "I believe you have bulbar ALS." I knew what ALS was, and I also knew it was the worst news possible. I was all alone at my appointment when I was told that I have an incurable disease with 2 to 5 years to live. We wanted a second opinion and found a neurologist in Toledo, Ohio, who specialized in ALS. She confirmed the diagnosis in December 2022. So we had a total of 9 months to get a diagnosis. My husband and I had just finished building a new home, and he had just retired. The first few weeks, I just tried to comprehend what was happening and what our future looked like. I am a full-time licensed realtor and hairstylist, and still working today. Being told you have ALS is a lot to process. All the things I had dreamed about in the future were now in limbo. What do I do with my time? I decided to spend my time researching ALS and learning all I could about the disease. I would become a citizen researcher who knew I would eventually lose my speech. My husband, Rob, and I have 2 sons and 8 grandkids. I wanted to be able to talk with them as my disease progressed. My first ALS clinic visit was in January 2023. We talked about voice banking and how it works. I tried several different websites and none of them were able to obtain legible words that we could use. I reached out to a speech therapist for help, and we determined that voice banking was not an option at this point. Unfortunately, my voice was already so compromised that the words weren't intelligible. This was another devastating moment in my journey. That window of opportunity for voice banking can be so small when it takes months to get a diagnosis. I decided that I was going to leave ALS better than I found it. My first step was to tell everybody that I had ALS. I made a Facebook post sharing my diagnosis and received over 500 comments. We formed a Facebook group called Hickman Strong, My Journey with ALS. As of today, we have over 1,800 followers in the group. I post information related to ALS and details about my doctor visits. Many people have told me they are learning so much from my posts. I have distributed several hundred ALS awareness wristbands and packets of blue corn flour, the flour for ALS, seeds to friends and family around the country. Just another way to spread awareness. I was searching for other ways to help the ALS community and learned about everything ALS. I was so intrigued by the Radcliffe study. I was happy to get further involved with research. I was also nominated to attend the NEALS Clinical Research Trial Learning Institute this fall. I am now a NEALS ambassador and am part of the Patient Advisory Committee for the Healy Platform trial at Mass General. I serve on 3 committees with IMALS, and I helped organize the first ever Lou Gehrig Day with the Toledo Mood Hens. As you can tell, I am passionate about research and awareness. I started using an app on my phone called Speech Assist to help me communicate. It is a wonderful tool when you have no other options. I am very involved in my community and a social butterfly, so you can see why losing my voice was so devastating. About 3 weeks ago, I learned during one of my study sessions with Everything ALS about voice cloning via AI. I was ready to participate and do whatever I could to not only help myself, but the future of those who cannot speak anymore due to ALS. Our first attempt with speech samples from my earlier Radcliffe sessions were unsuccessful, and the Everything Else data science team recommended to search for any 3-minute recording of my voice before fall of 2021. I turned to Facebook for help. I posted asking for my friends and family to check their voicemails and any possible places they may have a recording of my voice. Wow, was I overwhelmed. They all jumped on board. I received a few videos and voicemails from friends. Luckily, I had a few videos from my campaign for city council and my work with some nonprofits. They say it takes a village to get some things done. I am so thankful for my village. What you are hearing now is the first version of AI representing my voice with less than 3 minutes of records from noisy videos and voicemails. Thanks to the rapid progress in this technology, I am sure this will soon be an app version, allowing for the notion of authenticity when communicating via typing. I cannot express enough how much this means to someone who cannot speak anymore. My family must listen to voicemails so they can hear me speak. Can you imagine how wonderful it will be when I type out what I want to say and they hear me? I had a 1-sentence sample to proof. When I heard it, I teared up. This is amazing work being done by Everything ALS to help the future of so many people. ALS takes away so much from us. Having my own voice will change so much for me, my family, and my friends. It takes a community to make these changes. And being part of Everything ALS, where their care to cure is exactly what we need to bring our experts, researchers, and patients together to make these changes. I cannot say enough about the support and professionalism that Everything ALS provides to the study participants. They provide multiple avenues of information with expert talks and fireside chats. They make it easy to get questions answered, to have transparency into our own study data, and to co-create solutions for a better quality of life. We are living with the disease, and our stories will help shape the future, not only for medicine, but for technology too. And it is so rewarding to be part of something so wonderful. I have spent countless hours researching and compiling information. The future of ALS is changing every single day. There are more medications and therapies than ever right now. We are on a fast-moving train, and there are people jumping on it every day. As the future of medicine changes, it is important that technology evolve with it. We are so close not only to a cure, but to helping people with ALS live a better quality of life. With my AI voice, I will be speaking out and helping move this train down the line to Victory Station. Thank you.
And Roseanne is with us right now. And thank you, Roseanne, for joining us and sharing this. And, you know, as we said, this is a true citizen researcher, and that's what we empower. And from my personal experience, what I went through, this community has been left behind if we don't embrace the citizen research community. That is, we the people who go through the journey. And what Roseanne did and what we were able to do with Roseanne was, you know, with Steffi, you know, working with Roseanne directly and getting this voice back to her, and so that we can actually, you know, evolve our research as well. And our next speaker you're going to hear directly is Dr. Elad Yom-Tov, who's a professor of computer science at Bar Ilan University. And you will hear how he was able to embrace this citizen-driven research, that is care, that, you know, people who got involved in having this research, which was really bringing how do you use internet to improve medicine. And Elad was previously a researcher at Microsoft, and before that in Yahoo, IBM, and Rafael. So he has had over 200 scientific papers and over 30 patents, and most recently an author of Crowdsourced Health. And with that, I will ask Elad to join us and share his presentation.
Okay, thank you very much, Indu. So as Indu said, I'll talk about work that we did with Everything ALS. And this is with Indu, Ernest, and James Berry. And as Indu mentioned, this was work that was done while I was at Microsoft, and this will become important in a minute. And so I've been interested in using the data that we leave online, especially when we query a search engine such as Bing or Google, in order to study health. And I think it's a very interesting new data channel because it's a way of passively sensing. So we don't need to get people to the clinic, or we don't need them to fill a questionnaire. Almost everybody uses the internet these days, and the vast majority use a search engine. And so if we can tap into these data, we have a passive way of measuring and observing people. And it's, as I said, everybody uses it, so it's ubiquitous. And so we've been using those kinds of data to learn about health. And one of the lines of study there is to screen for various medical conditions that people may have, of course, before they know that they have them. These days, there's a range of medical conditions that we can identify in these ways. Just by looking at how people query on Bing or Google and what they query can lead us to identify all these conditions that I've listed here. So things like dementia and Parkinson's disease, depression, psychosis, and anxiety, eating disorders, but also perhaps less obvious stroke. We have some data that we can identify it, as well as various cancers. And our starting point was the question of whether we can use these approaches to identify ALS. The way that most of these studies are run is that we tap into the data that these companies have already collected and use machine learning to build a model that we can then use. So that's how we started. And we started with people who are anonymous, so we don't know who these people are. And yet, at some point when they queried on Bing, they mentioned that they've been diagnosed with ALS. So they might query for, I've been diagnosed with ALS, or I have ALS, what are my options, things like that. And we compared them to people who made similar common queries, because that common queries are typical of similar people in the sense that they have similar interests and so forth. Now, the way that we measured people in these cases was we looked at attributes such as, did they need a spelling correction? Did they make what the search engine thought was a spelling mistake? And then things like how many characters did their queries have, how many words, and how long did they stay online? These are what we call the search sessions. How long were these typical search sessions? And we took data from the USA for an entire year of 2019. And in that year, we had around 285 people who, as I said, mentioned that they have ALS, and we compared them to around 3,300 controls. Just to show you briefly, these are two examples of the differences in these attributes that we measure between people with ALS and the control group. So if you look at the right-hand side, this is the average percentage of queries where we had a spelling mistake, or we estimated that there was a spelling mistake for both the control group in dashed and the ALS group in the bold line. And as you can see, the group of people that wrote at some point that they have ALS typically have somewhat more queries with what the algorithm identifies as a spelling mistake. If you look at the left-hand side, this is the average session duration. So this is essentially how long do they stay online. And here you can see that the group of people with ALS typically stay online less than the people who we estimate are healthy. So there are differences in these attributes, and we can take all these attributes together and build a model that distinguishes the people with ALS from what we think are healthy individuals. However, when we present this to the medical community, they rightly point out that we don't actually know that the people we think have ALS and vice versa, that the people we think are healthy do not have ALS. And that's because we never actually have access to these people. We never actually validated that whether or not they have ALS. And so we started working with the people of Everything ALS, and we had several meetings where we requested the members of Everything ALS to participate in the study. And participation in the study essentially meant that they went to our website where we explained the study with a nice little video. and a textual explanation. We asked them to consent, and then we asked them 6 questions about diagnosis, and that really gave us a validation that it's very likely that we know that these people do indeed have ALS. And finally, we asked them to click on a link, and that allowed us to, again, completely anonymously connect the answers that they gave us to the data that Microsoft collects for all its users. So now we had a group of people who we were much more confident had ALS, whereas before they only wrote it. And we know that sometimes people write that they have, in this case, ALS, where it's in fact their partner or somebody close to them. So this is a much better group in terms of the data. And so 122 people visited our website, 60 completed the questionnaire and agreed to participate. We judged according to these questions that 45 had indeed ALS. And I should mention that we also allowed healthy participants in the study as controls. And finally, because Bing, which is the data that we had access to, only has around a third of the search market in the US, 16 people, we could find their data. So it's a relatively small data set, but still one that we feel confident is pretty likely to be valid. So I'll show you 2 graphs here. The graph on the right-hand side is the graph that we built when we trained the model. The graph on the left-hand side is the one that we built when we validated the model in the method that I just described. What these graphs show are essentially what fraction of people with ALS will we discover at the cost of how many people will say have ALS when they are in fact healthy. So for every point on this curve, the horizontal axis is how many healthy people we will falsely claim have ALS, and the vertical axis is how many correct identifications we have. And so higher to the left-hand side is better, and the dotted line is if you flip a coin. And so what you can see if you compare the right to the left-hand side is the graphs are very similar. That's very encouraging because it means that what we thought is our performance based on the model that we trained is indeed what we see when we look at the data that we collected from the validated users. The model, I should say, is far from perfect. However, it is also far from noise. So depending on whether you want to look at the graph half full or half empty, but at least it shows very well that we have a reasonable signal to work with. And just using these very simple attributes of how people query on Bing, we can identify if they have ALS or not. I'll just mention that people then asked us, well, maybe we're identifying other conditions that are similar to ALS. So we used the same methodology and we compared, we applied the model to people who said that they have a whole range of other conditions that are similar to ALS that you can see here. The graph shows the distribution of the model scores. Higher scores means that we think these people are more likely to have ALS. And you can see that the people with ALS, the bold black curve, are more likely to have a higher score. Statistically, there was only one condition that we couldn't distinguish from the people with ALS, and that's mild cognitive impairment. Now, I should say that as we continue this study, the more people we have and the more attributes we use, we estimate that we can improve this model performance, and so we'll have a better model to work with. So to briefly, to finalize this brief presentation, I've shown you a validated model for ALS using these passively collected biomarkers, in this case from search engine data. We can, in fact, distinguish ALS from healthy people, but also from people with other similar conditions. And just recently, so just last month, our paper was published on this topic on muscle and nerve, and it appears here on the bottom. And you can look into it if you want some more details about it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Elon. This was great working with Elon and trying to, the opportunity to work with a researcher with such an amazing, insight was what the citizen-driven research, again, was able to quickly give that data. And so Elon can get to work in analyzing. And thanks for all your effort in doing the publication as well. And hopefully we'll take this to the next place to bring clinical endpoint with all of this knowledge that we have accumulated. And the next section that we will kick off is going to be with Team Gleason. I'm going to be inviting Blair Casey. And, I would say this working on everything ALS, being in doing this journey is tough. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Is a tough journey, but people like Blair make it easier. And I would call him a friend, a confidant whom I can actually pick up the call and whine and talk and, also share our expertise with each other. And a little bit about Blair Casey is one of the original members of Team Gleason, starting as Steve Gleason's caretaker after his diagnosis of ALS in 2011. After 3 years of taking care of Gleason, he, with his hands-on experience, he actually is today executive director at running Team Gleason. And Team Gleason continues to innovate in technology that is provided to people living with the ALS. And also, Blair was named on Gambit's 2022 as 40 under 40 for the list of work and dedication for advocating ALS community through technological innovation. With that, I'm going to invite Blair to talk a little bit and also kick off the next section in the presentation.
Excellent. Indu, thank you very much for the very warm introduction. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Excellent. So I remember receiving this email, and so I always like to start with the community in mind. Blair, you are a good friend, one of my best buds here in NOLA, and I'm sorry to drop this bomb on you so suddenly. It's not said often enough in life. I love you, buddy. Yesterday, I met with one of the leading amyotrophic lateral sclerosis physicians in the world, and he diagnosed me with ALS. I intended to write some inspiring piece about staying optimistic and beating this diagnosis with the
I'm here. Hi.
Same determination.
Thanks.
Blair, can you unmute yourself? Sorry.
Yes.
Sorry.
Did I just lose you, or was it?
Yes. If you can just talk about the slide, that'd be great.
Yeah. What resonates here is my friend wanting to be honest and being scared and being frustrated, being vulnerable. At this point, I did not understand what ALS was. I remember calling my father, and I remember these keen words: spend as much time with your friend as possible. So let me tell you about my friend Steve. Steve was a counterculture athlete, played with the NFL Saints from 2000 to 2008, and he married New Orleanian Michelle Verisco, and I was a friend and a family member to them at this point. And so, like anybody else, you want to take care of your family, like everyone here. And so I became his caretaker. And along this journey, I remember when it began, Steve found that there wasn't any ALS organization focusing on the now needs. He saw people like Stephen Hawking, who lived with ALS for 52 years, leveraging assistive technology and care to do the things that he wanted to do. For that reason, he founded Team Gleason in 2011 to provide leading edge technology, equipment, and services, and to document these extraordinary life experiences to where we could tell the human story and how people are continuing to live when faced with the ALS diagnosis and adversity. One of Steve's key quotes that everybody probably has heard by now: until there's a cure for ALS, technology can be that cure. And I think that's really resonated through Team Gleason's mission. For those of you who do not know, Team Gleason's mission is to improve the life of people with ALS by providing essential innovative technology and equipment to enhance their quality of life. And the way that we do this is simple. We do it through mobility, communication, innovation, and then environmental controls, home automation. our services ranging from communication devices, whether it be a copay or a loaner in any state in the United States, to one of the thousands of synthetic voices we've provided, to the ability to drive your wheelchair with your eyes. All these now needs are needs that the community has identified as gaps, and Steve and founding team Gleason wanted to ensure that we had the best available resources as well as the best available clinicians to make sure the community not just had the tools, but also had the resource, trust, and this larger family that is the ALS family, right? Nobody asked to be a part of this village, but it brings the best people, and I could look on this at the symposium panel, and as Indu mentioned, this is family. We pick up the phone at any point and we're here for each other. So Steve set a lofty goal for us to triple the amount of people that we're helping with our services by the end of 2027. So before we get into how we advance the technology, it's how we do it right now. We're fortunate that we have, as Michelle says, a badass team, right? And this team, it ranges from clinicians to associates. Everybody has one thing in common. We're here to make sure that people don't just have the technology and equipment with ALS, but they have the relationship. They have somebody that they can talk to along this journey, because oftentimes that trust, that relationship is just as equally as important to the services themselves. So when we talk about how we advance these technologies, we're fortunate that we have an amazing technology advisory committee spanning from engineers, from Comcast to Microsoft, to people living with this disease. And this ecosystem and this advisory committee has allowed us to really push the limits of what's possible. When Steve set us out quite some time ago to find more solutions, better solutions, as the rate of technology changes, we had to make sure that we had the right team and the right advisors to do so. Team Gleason's innovations span from, in 2014, participating in a hackathon, to most recently participating in the speech accessibility project that's being put on by Microsoft, Google, Meta, Apple, and Amazon. Why do we participate and why do we push the boundaries of what's possible? Because everything that we work on is a result of the person living with this disease identifying that there's a gap. The first example I mentioned with going to Microsoft in 2014 was a result of watching my friend Steve at this point, lose his ability to speak, lose his ability to walk. And at that time, part of him lost his ability to think that he could be the best version of himself as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as a leader. He didn't know how he was going to do that parent when he was so used to being a physical parent. Watching his ability to lose the drive control in his hand to trying every single egg switch led us to Microsoft to challenge them to be able to drive his wheelchair with his eyes. Most thought that was crazy at the time. I did too. But within a month, they had a prototype. And the joy that I saw in his face, being able to follow his son around and actually teach his son how to walk with this technology. At first it was tears of pain, and then it was tears of joy. This example is the example that we've continued to do with leaders in the technology industry, but it requires patient interaction, as well as the proper data to ensure that this technology is really accessible. One of our next innovations was working with Bob McDonald and Michael Brenner at Google on Google Euphonia. For those of you who are not familiar, Google Euphonia, as it started, was a research project in conjunction with ALS TDI, and Michael Brenner and Bob McDonald knew what they had and really forced and challenged themselves to see how they could widely adapt these models to make them more generally accessible for the community. What does that require? It requires a significant amount of non-standard speech data. Team Gleason worked with Google to collect more non-standard speech data than any and all organizations. And by doing this, they now have Project Relate, an app that allows people that are experiencing non-standard speech dysarthric speech to use to communicate with their friends, their family, and interact with their environment. These innovations, although very difficult, require some of the best people and the best humans in the world. Without people that are driven, dedicated, motivated, and compassionate, we don't see a change. Microsoft, like Google is what we've continued to see in the advancements and collaborations that Team Gleason has had with leaders in the technology industry. We look at what Apple has done recently with their personal voice feature, as well as Comcast with their eye gaze enabled remote, so that an individual can just use their eyes to actually control their cable and some aspects of their environment. All these solutions are necessary, but we have to make sure that people actually have access to them. You know, Team Gleason is continuing to push the envelope of what's possible, passing 2 pieces of legislation, providing over $30 million in technology equipment, services, and ventures to every state. We have successfully partnered with Microsoft, Apple, Google, Comcast, and more. And my good friend Steve was awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in January of 2020. Team Gleason's program services are going to continue to increase. We're receiving on average 500 requests a month. And while we provide the best, it requires leaders in the industry collaborating and the necessary data sets that represent the community that they're intended to serve. In closing, our friends need more. They need more connectivity. They need more access. They need more independence, and they need more options. The only way that this happens is by collaborating with industry leaders, by collaborating with others in this ecosystem, and by working directly with the patient for the patient. Their environment is the most important aspect because every environment's different. And these are the data sets that we require and information that we require to ensure that the technology advances and continues to be developed. I am very thankful for this group for having me and always leaning on Team Gleason and having Indu, you in our corner. And I'm very proud of the work that everybody thus far has presented on. And I'm very proud to introduce, if that's okay, Indu, may I?
Yes, of course.
Good friend and colleague, Bob McDonald. As I mentioned, Bob has been one of Team Gleason's closest allies for quite some time. I've been fortunate to work on multiple initiatives with him, from Euphonia, Speak Faster, Look to Speak, Activate. All of these apps that I'm mentioning start with the person, and then it requires the data. And ultimately, every single one of these projects has resulted in people increasing access to these solutions. But it starts with a great leader and a great team, and I'm very proud to introduce Bob McDonald.
Thank you, Blair. And good morning or good afternoon, everyone. Let me just get to the right tab to share. Bear with me a second. Okay, great. So yeah, as Blair mentioned, we've been working in collaboration with Team Gleason, as well as a number of other organizations for a number of years now, with the original focus really was oriented towards healthcare and using speech and other signals to train AI models to do things that would be useful for our partner at the time that got this whole thing started, ALS TDI, see if we could provide a more objective and accurate measure of disease progression. But as our team became more deeply involved in the program and meeting people with ALS, their families, their care providers, it became increasingly clear that one of the fundamental challenges that in the near term seemed worth leaning into was communication. And so, I'm going to do a little bit of a pivot from kind of healthcare applications of AI to something, that's a little bit more fundamental, which is communication. If your communication breaks down, that impacts many aspects of the quality of life, including, healthcare related ones. So, so we began to take a look at the data that had been collected with this kind of, medical use case in mind towards one which was more accessibility oriented. And that really looked promising enough that we shifted a significant fraction of our energy towards improving our speech recognition models to begin with for people with ALS, and eventually for people with a wide variety of atypical speech or impaired speech. So I'll just hit some of the tips of the waves there, but but I think there remains exciting opportunities for applications of AI in other aspects of healthcare related to ALS, other neurodegenerative diseases, and other conditions, while at the same time, all of these communities affected, as Blair mentioned, deserve more options and better communication. I think we're at sort of a tipping point, in my view, of being able to provide these improved communication features to many more people. So indeed, there are hundreds of millions of people worldwide whose speech has been modified from what's considered typical to the extent that they're considered to have non-standard or impaired speech. Bear with me. So this slide shows a picture of Dimitri. Dimitri is a researcher at Google who was kind of one of our internal champions, helping blaze the trail from research. Dimitri is deaf, and he learned to speak English. He was born in Russia, and he lost his hearing at an early age. And so he learned to speak English after having lost his ability to hear. So while people who've worked with Dimitri for a while have developed a sense for how to understand his sort of specific patterns of speech, it's harder for other people who haven't come to know Dimitri as well to understand him. So we did a lot of the early internal work with him, and he provided thousands of samples of his speech that really kind of formed the basis for Project Euphonia. We were pleasantly surprised about 4 years ago when this early small research project was showcased at Google's annual tech event called I/O. And that gave us, I think, both a sense that there was really strong executive support to pursue something like this, where there is really no commercial basis. Just looking at, any financial assessment of what we were doing, it would have been, very close to the bottom of the stack of things that a for-profit company would be putting energy into. But the good news is that I think there was a wider recognition that this had space in terms of doing things that are useful for people who stand to benefit the most. As Blair mentioned, one of the ways that we've engaged with Team Gleason, ALS TDI, and others is around data collection. And Blair and his team have been unbelievably effective and generous with their time and energy to help drive this, because there is just such a scarcity of speech from these communities. And almost all things you want to do with AI, you can do better with more data, with more diverse data, more representative data. So we set about working on these, with these key partners, and built a custom app to collect speech samples, and hear those voices of people whose voices have been modified, or maybe whose voices have just been different from the time they were born. People with Down syndrome, cerebral palsy, other conditions, that can affect your voice from the start, are also kind of in focus for what we've done. We asked people to provide a range of speech samples that include varieties based on length, based on the content, and a lot of the learning that's come along as we've pursued this research has been well, what's the most effective data to collect? Because this takes time, it takes energy, it's costly to curate and to process. And out of respect for the people that are engaged in this, we really want to understand where is the best bang for the buck. What are the things that you need to do so that you can build the most robust and useful end product? And so this graph here shows sort of a timeline of the data set that we've built. You can see that in mid-2019, it really started to ramp up. That was around the time that we started working with Blair and the extended Team Gleason crew. And you can see in the last year, it's kind of tapered off a bit. One of the primary reasons for that is that while doing this, we also started a collaboration that Blair mentioned with Microsoft, Apple, Amazon, Meta, to try to provide funding for a program that collect similar speech data that could be made widely available to research teams outside of any one company. Because we didn't have the foresight to kind of anticipate the strong need from the ecosystem for access to data like this. So we don't have the consent from all of those early contributors to just make copies available of their data. And they do own the data. We're just stewards of it. So in the last year, the Speech Accessibility Project started, being run by University of Illinois. All of the samples that they collect are kind of pooled together. We're working to find any Euphonia contributors who would like their data that they've done with Euphonia to be copied over to the Speech Accessibility Project, just because we think that that's the way to have the most positive impact, but we're not going to assume that that's the choice that everyone is going to want to make. So you can see we've collected over 1 million utterances, several thousand hours of audio data from several thousand speakers. We have over 15 what we call etiologies. Those are kind of sources of impairment. And we've done this, as I mentioned, in collaboration and only possible at this scale with some incredible partners. The reason we did this was really to build a product. And I'm just going to quickly touch on that. The good news is that the research advanced far enough that we did find a recipe that we felt confident enough in its kind of success chances to adapt a speech recognition model for anyone who was willing and able to provide a few hundred speech samples. And that's what this app does. Actually, I'll just go ahead and show this video because I think it really captures the essence. Oh, maybe not. Anyway, that picture was, and the video that was not wanting to start up was Aubrey, who's also a Google employee. She has severely impaired speech, but she's incredibly brilliant and thoughtful and is a power user of this app that allows, after she's gone through this process of recording a few hundred samples, we build a personalized speech recognition model for her. And once that's done, she can use this model in one of 3 different ways. It can provide a live transcription. So whoever she's talking to, while they're listening to her, they can also see the text that she's saying in real time, just to help them kind of solidify their understanding of what she's saying. She can use it to repeat what she said in a kind of a computerized voice, just in case the other person can't see her screen, or it's just more convenient to hear it come out in audio format. Or she can use her voice just to interact with Google search and and other voice input features. So we're very optimistic that there's huge potential in the upcoming years for communication tools to be built to greatly improve quality of life, connectedness, independence for people as their voices are changing. And indeed, we are still collecting speech samples. Sorry, I saw the question that came up a couple of minutes ago. And really I would encourage folks either to connect up with us at Project Euphonia or to the Speech Accessibility Project, where your data will be made available not just to our team, but to other teams who have a bona fide kind of positive use for the data. So with that, I will hand it back to Blair.
Thank you very much, Bob. We appreciate you and all of the work that your team's done. ALS, as I mentioned before, takes a village, and Bob, his team are certainly a part of this village. And we're also very fortunate that we've worked with Microsoft for quite some time. Microsoft has been a long-standing partner, dating back to 2014, as I mentioned. We integrated the necessary eye gaze drivers to make sure that all communication device eye gaze bars were actually then became native and would be usable with the Surface Pro. We also created the on-screen keyboard with them. And some of the individuals behind this team are on this call today, but one in particular, Garfield, is with us today. And I think it was this past week or recently, I know Microsoft introduced new multilingual languages supporting 41 languages and accents. So upon further ado, I'd like to introduce Garfield, my good friend and colleague, to give us an update on what Microsoft's been doing.
So Blair, I think, we're a little bit ahead of schedule, so we thought we will give a 10-minute break and then continue on. And our next speaker after that is going to be Garfield.
Sorry for getting ahead of myself.
You are always ahead, Blair.
During the break, I can pop up this video that just shows someone using the
please,
Relate
Bob,
app.
please go ahead.
Excellent. Okay, so yeah, anyone who's interested, feel free to hang out or keep your speaker on.
Yeah, and we will, for those people, we will have Microsoft start at 10:55 as we planned, but don't miss this.
Okay, great. Here's a video of an early user, what we call a trusted tester of the Relate app, having a conversation with one of our team members. And I hope this will play. Oh, hold on, maybe I just need to back out of presentation mode. So yeah, you can see that the transcript is doing a pretty good job of recognizing.
We can't hear Bob. We can't hear.
Oh yeah, unfortunately the audio was lost in transfer.
Yeah, sorry. I thought you were still working on bringing the audio,
Yeah.
so it was like.
Oh, I see. Okay, let me
we couldn't
see
hear.
if. Oh, interesting. Okay.
Yeah, something about the Zoom setting.
Yeah, it's.
I had a problem with
Um,
that audio too.
Let me try sharing a different way.
Mhm.
Okay.
Just
Let me try sharing the entire, oh, maybe this will work. Also share tab audio. Okay. Sorry about that, everyone.
I can go to like a public school. So my parents kind of had to fight for that. But I got into the public school.
Could you turn on listen so I can see what transcript of what you're saying? You were just got to the point of saying that you got into public school.
I got into public school and it opened up a whole big thing for other kids with disabilities to start going to public school. And I started a couple years after a lot more kids being in my school. And then I went to then my parents moved to Florida, and I met a lot more people.
Okay, did that work?
that did work. Amazing.
Okay.
That is amazing. Bob, from what I saw, even a year and a half ago to now, it's crazy how good it is. This is
Yeah. And and I think the future is bright. The more data that's available, the more techniques for speech recognition and other language technologies advances, the better these tools will become.
Yeah. Well, thanks for everything you're doing, and your group for ALS can't be, appreciate enough for what you guys are doing. It's fantastic.
Thank you.
So with that, we are going to be on break until 10:55 a.m. So Bob, I think you're in West Coast, right? Like me?
That's right.
Okay, so you get the coffee break.
Excellent. Okay, I just need to find my mute.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back. And we have our next speaker here, and we'll just 1 minute here. Let me. And thanks to Bob. And if you have any questions, we will be covering the Q&A towards the end. So keep your question for Bob. And we have Garfield Ha on the line here. And Blair, if you can do an introduction again, we'll kick this second section off.
Excellent. Thank you, Indu. As I was mentioning before, Team Gleason has had a long-standing relationship with Microsoft dating back to 2014 when we participated in a hackathon, and their focus on integrating the eye gaze drivers into Windows was critical at that point for people living with ALS, as well as working on the first rendition of iDrive technology, the ability to drive your chair with your eyes. Over the years, we've worked with many teams within Microsoft, from Health Team Enable to research. And most recently, we've had the fortunate pleasure to work with Garfield and his team. And as I mentioned before, one of his recent articles, Garfield introduced in a publication new multilingual voices supporting 41 languages and accents, also with auto language detection. But without further ado, I would like to introduce my good friend and colleague, Garfield Ha.
You're on mute, Garfield. I'm going to count how many times we say that in this session, in the 3 hours.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for noticing. And thank you, Blair, for the introduction. I'm very thrilled to join the sharing today. And then, yeah, so I will give you some brief introduction. First of all, let me just make sure I can share my screen correctly. Let's see. Okay, please let me know if you already see my screen.
Yeah.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. So I will just give you some brief introduction about myself. As Blair already mentioned, I'm a product manager in Microsoft. We are on the AI team, especially for speech. And then very happy that we have a long relationship with Blair and Team Gleason for the last few years. We are exploring many opportunities to bring the AI, especially later I will give more introduction about the custom voice to help our pals to get back their TTS from the recording of themselves, so that we're trying to bring the way of communication back with the help of the AI. So yeah, this is basically is what the project we are doing right now. So later I will give you some brief introduction about Azure AI, especially in speech, and then what kind of accessibility cases we are working on, and then what is the technology we are using to addressing the issue. And meanwhile, I'm also going to share with everybody about the challenging we are seeing in the new era about the AI and in the accessibility usage. So I will get started first, and then if you have any question, feel free to let me know, or we can have some discussion later. Okay, yeah, so here is like we're talking about accessibility. Actually, accessibility is part of very core responsibility for the Azure AI. So because as we know, 1 billion people around the world have some kind of form of disability. Someone have permanently, someone temporary, and someone is situational. So in accessibility is something we need to make sure that all our product or our feature is compliant with that, and then we can using the AI technology to empower people with our feature. So this is the very core identity of our product. And as you can see, there's some common use case where the Azure AI can be helpful in accessibility. So here are a few things related very closely to speech specifically. And when we talk about speech, actually there are two main two main, how do I say, two main feature of that. We have something called speech to text, and then another way, a text to speech. So speech to text is like many helpful for people may not be lots of ability of hearing, so that we can transform the speaking into text for them to be able to read out. And then the text to speech at first actually used very commonly in narration, especially for the people who lost the vision, so they can listen to what exactly happening on the screen by the text being read out. And now actually we also using that for the ALS community because of the voice losing for some person that actually and then the mobility ability also losing. So this is the part we also trying to help them to use the text-to-speech technology here. And at first, the text-to-speech technology is more like we're using some very robotic voices to help them to be able to communicate. But with the technical speech, now we have a neural version, which is a very natural way of speaking out from the machine. So this is the part that we are exploring to using the neural TTS to improve the experience for our ALS user. As well, we're also trying to see that for our custom neural voice, where we can very well preserve the voice identity, and we're hoping that it can be the technology to help our user to gain back their voices. So this is something we are working on. And so this is just what kind of cases about the accessibility for text-to-speech specifically very useful. First of all, like I said, the narrator on Windows, and then for people who have difficulty for reading, we have like someone who's dyslexia, and then someone who lost the voice when communicate, like ALS patient or people who have throat cancer or tongue cancer, which it also impact their ability to speak. And let's take a look on our Azure AI text-to-speech. We have two type of voices we can offer here. Actually, these voices, they all very close to human already. And what is the difference here? The difference here will be like the preview one is something we build a common voice there, and then we just put it for like everybody can access and everybody can use it. And the preview voice, so far we are supporting 460 different voices across 140 languages and different accents. And the capabilities can be used online and as well as offline, like because we know that for accessibility case, our user will need the ability to speak for no matter when. So the connectivity is very important here. And but this is the part is like it is a preview voice, so everybody will using the same voice. You might hear the same voice everywhere, and the lack of identity here. So meanwhile, we're also providing another feature which we call the custom neural voice. So the custom neural voice right now is the product which can help you to train a voice with your own data. So when you are going to inject the data into this product, we can come out the voice sound exactly like you, or at least sound exactly like the data when you are doing the recording and put into the model training. So this is the part that we are expecting they can be more useful and then can be more accept to all the people who in need of the identity with their voices. So far the custom neural voice is we support less language than the preview voice because they're mainly on the top speaking languages in English and then European language and some of the Asian language here. And then we have different version there. We have the Pro and the Light version. The Pro mean if you have more than around 30 minutes to 1 hour of recording, then you can put a certain amount of data and can have a very high quality voices, which can be comparable to our preview voices quality on the pronunciation accuracy, on the tone, on the fidelity of the voices. And but we understand that there is a lot of people, they may not have a chance to preserve the voice at the beginning. So we also offer the live version, which is like right now we can accept from 1 minute to around 10 minutes of the audio. We also can replicate the voice. So in this case, the voice will be a little bit less sound like exactly less the quality will be less than the Pro, but actually already very similar to the voice owner themselves. So this is the thing we're trying to do at the moment. And then the technology also have one thing is like we can cross-lingual. It's very helpful for especially people who are bilingual or trilingual when they need to speak English and Chinese or English and Spanish or English and French together. This kind of thing, they only need to provide their recording in one language. So the model will be able to adapt them to the different language for them to communicate. And even though more language, even though the language they don't know at all, but we still can trying to train that like they are speaking that language fluently. And so far this feature is only available on cloud, but like Blair just mentioned in the beginning, actually we're also exploring with the team Gleason on making this voice on devices. We have some project on that, and then we are expecting this on device solution can be able to deliver in the future. Okay, so yes, so this is more introduction about custom voice. Like we can have a persona and we can have the natural interaction with your own voice. This is the main benefit from the custom neural voice. So, and then this is the what I also talk about the custom neural voice, different version of custom neural voice. And here are some use case. We are already using the natural voice here. Like on Windows 11, the latest version, we have support that in narrator for most of the highly used languages like Chinese, English, French, German, Japanese, and Portuguese, Spanish here. And this is the thing is already available to everyone as long as who is using Windows 11, and then they already can access that, and they can use that on the narrator. And in China, we also doing another project with a Blair NGO. So this is the part is like they making the audio book with the custom voice. So what voice they're custom here? They custom a very famous teacher named Lina Dong. She is a very famous teacher in the Black community in China. So her voice is very like signature and very she also donate a lot of her time for reading book for the Black people because the audio book is a very scarce resource in China. And then in this project, we work with her. We create the voice for Lina, and then we also work with another very famous artist called Xun Zhou. She is also a movie actress, and then she also donate her voices to make her voice be able to read out the audio book for the Black community. So this is the part that we already using the custom neural voice to create something like signature voice to make the resource be accessible to people who need the content being read out by TTS. And yeah, so for next step, I would like to explore a little bit about the challenging or what is the principle we need to stick with the custom neural voice. Actually, as you know, the AI is getting very human-like at the moment. So there's some principle we really need to be stick to is first of all, it will be the responsible AI principle. So in this part, we need to make sure that our data transparency, we have the reliability and safety, inclusive accountability and thing. And most of all, I would like to call out is like the custom neural voice right now, even because it is quite powerful because we only need the first very such small amount of data, we already can like replicate the voices. So here, this feature actually is a limited access to organization only. So far we are not able to open that to anyone, just like personal coming to use it because the feature is so, I would say, so powerful, so that we avoid that in order to align with the responsible AI principle, we don't want the feature become harmful to anybody because it's very easy like someone just get a clip of someone recording and then make a voice and then they may make some fraud call or some other statement which may harm some people. So in this case, so we would like to call out that the custom neural voice right now is having some limitation. We have the limited access. We only grant the access to certain organization to be able to use that. And then we ask them to only use it in a certain approved use case, and then also need to follow our code of conduct when they are using the voice, and then they also need to disclose that, okay, actually the voice is made by a synthetic instead of a human recording. So this is something we always need to consider when in our daily use. So I would like to talk about some challenges. So as we discovered earlier, the custom voice right now is a service which is only available to organization. So we would like to, we're very thankful, first of all, very thankful to Team Gleason in helping us as an organization to bring the technology to the end user and Microsoft together. Because Microsoft want to use the technology here to help the people, but actually we cannot offer that to them directly. So this is the part that we thank you. Some organization can help us, especially Team Gleason here. And then we also see that there is some lack of recording because some people may already lost their voice. So this is the part we're also trying to use technology to help to improve that. And another thing will be cost consideration because if the organization and the user, they're going to use this service, it will have created as a consumption. And this is the part that we may need to consider into it. And then embedded model to support the full-time use. This is the thing our team is working on that to trying to see if we can have a very good model to support people who in need to be able to use it 24 hours. And then the rest will be the responsible AI. We need to think about how to protect our voice identity, how to protect our user, and how to protect the people around our user to make sure that their voices will not be used in a harmful way. Yeah, so basically this is something I would like to share to our community. And then I would like to thank you again for Blair and Team Gleason and everybody for invite me to have this introduction. And then am expecting in the future we can have more opportunity to explore different solution and help and using our AI to help more people in need.
Thank you, Garfield. Really appreciate it. And we do have a panel and a Q&A session after two more speakers. So I'm sure some questions that came up on the chat, and we'll address it. And right on time, as Garfield was sharing about responsible AI, security, and privacy, I would love to invite a good friend of mine, Fleming Shi, and who's the CTO of Barracuda Networks, who is driving transformative technology solutions to support Barracuda's broad portfolio of products in security and data protection. As we move into the world of integrated products, we have email security, data protection, network security, generative AI, which we talked about. Barracuda Networks has been in the forefront of delivering higher performance and efficacy to customers. And with no further ado, I would love to introduce Fleming Shi and have him take us through the next presentation.
Absolutely. Indu, thank you for the intro. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak up about how cybersecurity is almost in a parallel space as our physical health and everything. So especially just gone through a pandemic. So I'm going to cover cybersecurity perspective of how AI is actually helping us in doing our fights against cyber attacks. To start, the top 5 cybersecurity trends I wanted to share real quickly is that the world will be actually looking at about 200 zettabytes of data by 2025. And today is 2023. We're dealing with about 50 zettabytes of data. So how do we go from 50 to 200 in 2 years? That's because there's a lot of data that's created by machines, because humans, we're not going to quadruple our population, right? And the perspective of cyber crimes eclipsed 10.5 trillion by 2025. So that's a very daunting number. The attackers are, the bad guys are winning in this case. And the global cybersecurity spend is also going to go up. And more importantly, 75% of the human population age 6 and older will be actually online. So just remember that stat because it's important. And also the number of job openings in cybersecurity continues to grow. And unfortunately, we just don't have enough resources. So data is the field that powers AI just as much as what you already heard. There's a lot of data related to life science and interactions with patients and all that. But in the world of cybersecurity, data is absolutely the constant that allows us to actually get better in using our technology. So unfortunately, we do have constant battles every day. So zero-day malware detection, we actually at Barracuda, this is data from our operations center, over 1 million per day. That's accounts average about 12 per second. These are zero-day events persistent threats. That's actually ransomware or any type of malware that destroys your environment. Of course, URLs is in everything, including QR codes, how your mobile app interacts with the server side and all those things. We're actually seeing 350 million through our install base every day. And out of that, 400,000 are malicious, right? So number of IPs, the infrastructure we have been having for many decades, unfortunately, still one of the critical infrastructures. And a lot of it still every day, more than close to 1/5 is malicious. Basically, botnets have taken over hyperscaled environments and basically people's systems. We even see botnets in people's smart devices running from home. And of course, one of the largest attack surface is email. And email-borne phishing link that we prevent every day is roughly about 500,000 per day. This is an important number. Remember, 500,000 times a day, we're stopping actually a user from clicking through into a phishing attack that could harvest your credentials, could steal your information, could install software on your endpoints. So also, there's a business model related to cyber attacks. Unlike the situation we have to deal with ALS, this is actually malicious from attackers. They're going after financial gains. They're going after state-sponsored situations where actually potentially can hurt the citizens of any country, right? So that said, human-operated ransom success rate is 2,500 to 1, right? So they're actually gonna find a way to target 2,500 organizations, and 60 of those who are in counter activity associated with non-ransom attacks. Actually, they take action on those, and then they find 2 compromises and actually get 1 success ransomware demand in their way. So unfortunately, this is their business model. So what's really crazy is this matches the MITRE attack framework. So this is on the cybersecurity side. These are all the different techniques used by attackers. From depth and breadth perspective, it's very broad. So interactions with starting from reconnaissance to resource development, initially accessing once they have stolen your credentials, eventually they execute on your environment and persist their footprint, and eventually do lateral movements and get to collecting the data, eventually exfiltrate the data and ask for ransom, right? So if you sum it up, it's 5 main phases, right? Stealing the credential, compromise the network, and laterally moving your environment, identify the best asset, and eventually get to data exfiltration and ransom demand. So in this scenario, it is actually unfortunate because AI is going to make this attack phase and that success rate model run a lot faster. So the volume is going to increase. So to some degree, where we started at Barracuda's journey, artificial intelligence is not new. It started in 1956 when the concept was born. And in fact, in the 40 years, humans have done a lot of stuff, but nothing really came about until we started using machine learning in 1997. In between, there were a lot of scary movies, starting from HAL 9000, I think, in the Space Odyssey 2001, all the way to Westworld, right? So there's a lot of perspective related to AI harming humans, really. So in this case, the world actually started using machine learning in 1997, and not too long later, only 20 years later, deep learning that actually started to taking use cases that helped us get to places, especially in cybersecurity. And 2021, Gen AI with GPT 3.5, Turbo, and other different large language models were made available, so we can do really cool stuff like generating visual content and text content, right? So it's not a new thing. Barracuda has been on this journey together with the rest of the world. The areas we have to pay attention to is obviously hallucination, fabrication, when the phenomenon of AI was starting to create incorrect and nonsensical or not even real content. So you have to pay attention to the output. Of course, there's so many AI concepts here. I'm only going to cover 2. The second one that we actually start working with Microsoft on. Thank you to Mr. Ha and the team in Microsoft Azure. Actually gave us the opportunity to together actually combining context specific vector embeddings of text, images, audio, video, which provides control over the data used by the large language model that during the generation. So this concept called RAG, I'm pretty sure many have heard, is retrieval augmented generation. So just a quick architectural, what we have done is we actually use OpenAI in our Azure tenant. So it's very important to have safety first. So you don't just go out to ChatGPT. In fact, in the beginning, our legal department put out a policy so no one can use ChatGPT, but everyone knows everyone will be using ChatGPT. Really, the concept here is to make sure it's done in a responsible way, so the content that you're exchanging with the chatbot never leaves the custody of your company, right? So in this case, what we did is we, of course, use large language model, OpenAI model. We use GPT 3.5 Turbo. We use vector embeddings using cognitive search, vector search capability. We took in 22,000 Barracuda content. Really, it's tech documents related to our product, related to cybersecurity, and actually get all the stuff in. Now we have a RAG on top of large language model, gives us far more accuracy. And of course, there's always still a little bit of room for error. So constantly we have to monitor the quality of the output. So that said, as I mentioned, as bad as the AI can be for as it can create problems in terms of volume, we also can see AI can be a game changer for protection, right? So more targeted and personalized security awareness training is one area we're focusing on, but analyzing a large amount of data more effectively. Because when you have too much noise, cybersecurity cannot be fast enough to deal with the incident. And correlation of signals across multiple attack surfaces, as I mentioned in the MITRE attack framework, there's so many attack surfaces, you need to be able to actually correlate the information. Very similar to health, I'm very sure there's many signals in telemetry that allows you to do correlation. And one most powerful piece is natural language-based query builder to extract useful data. So instead of actually having a data engineer creating the query, testing the query, then execute in a cyber event, you want to be able to say, hey, I need Fleming's logging data from all over the world so I can examine what is normal versus not normal. That data can be extracted very quickly. In fact, we have done this already. In the near future, we'll showcase in one of my demos if I ever get invited back. So, but that said, the other thing, as I mentioned, 75% of the human population, 6 years and older, will be touching a digital device starting 2025, right? And what we have done here is instead of actually simulating security awareness training, I'm pretty sure some of you guys do go through that on a quarterly basis. And most of them are kind of boring, right? Like, this one's fake one, or maybe if you just click on it, you get ding dong. But really the best time to train users at the point when the user are clicking through. Remember the stat I shared with you? 518,000 times we're actually blocking people from clicking through to an actual phishing attack created by the attackers. Now, that's the best place to actually utilize generative AI to actually train with context related to cybersecurity, the user, to actually understand why you're blocked. And what's neat about this, it's kind of like a vaccine. This is what I was telling Indu. Vaccine for COVID is like a vaccine for cyber events. So the users are going to get better. And remember, our kids 6 years and older, I mean, we wouldn't let them run around on the freeway during a traffic hour because we know they're going to get hurt. Why do we let them not get trained in time before they start their first job, right? So this is important to realize. We have to change our method, our mindset, how to get our kids to be ready. When they get their diploma, they should already be cybersecurity aware. They shouldn't go through the first cybersecurity awareness training in their first job because it's already too late. They're doctors already, they're teachers, they're touching personal information. So it's such a parallel world to what you guys are doing. And I believe it's important to also realize the generative AI risks, right? Cybersecurity, as I talked about, privacy, contractual compliance. A lot of times contracts are written, many years ago. You need to make sure that data handling, all that stuff is still continuously supported. Intellectual property, the generation of the data, or maybe even code could actually be, problematic in terms of intellectual property. And existing regulations, that's going to continue to happen. And transparency and ethics, as I mentioned, you will have a lot of actually ethics, AI data, specialists that deals with that, and quality control of, and as well as loss of skills. All these things. So those are the risks that we see. Obviously at Barracuda, it's new to many, many industries. In cybersecurity, it's also very new. So now I know I have to jump very soon, but I wanted to share this story with you. The way I think about generative AI, evolution of AI compared to a wheel. So actually, when human discovered the wheel or actually invented the wheel, it wasn't even used for transportation, right? It was used for like using for milling, and sometimes for food and for other things, right? Then and eventually, I would say the world started using it for some type of transportation, and the world discovered bicycles. Then we can move a little faster and quicker. But however, there wasn't really much safety involved, especially when you got into a car like this, and potentially you can get into a lot of trouble. If imagine this thing gets an impact, it's very dangerous. There's no safety belts, none of that. So this is how I think about generative AI. Right now, we're exposed to a technology that's going to be transformative. And in fact, I think it's going to be deflationary. It's going to help us move faster, especially when you get into a car like this. It's a lot more faster. Initially we had passive, safety, seatbelts, crumple zones. Then eventually we have first generation active safety, airbags, anti-lock brakes, right? Then second generation active safety will lane departure warning, electronic stability control, and eventually will be full autopilot to that degree. And remember, the folks, I think the society is also going to apply regulations. It's going to be at regulations, then eventually will be certifications. So you will have, for example, speed limits, right? So think about that as a comparison in this context. But I believe generative AI is here to stay, and we're gonna continue to utilize these tools and get really good at productivity and using it for our benefits. But just remember, there's a lot of responsibility as we touch it in the very early stages and work together to build out that safety zone and provide the capability of generative AI in the future. Doesn't matter if it's related to ALS or healthcare, but also in cybersecurity parallel universe where we live, we'll spend time on, it's going to be the same. So I appreciate the time, Indu. I wish I had more time, but it's great to meet all of you guys, and I'd love to share more in the future.
Thank you, Fleming. And this is fantastic. And what Fleming shared was, there is great brains like himself, his team, and security industries working on this. So our goal is to really speed up discovery for ALS and other neurodegenerative disease, because we can't live in the dark. We've been in this for 80 years. And now is the time, with using all the technology and all the brain power that you guys are bringing together. So thank you very much. And with the next presentation that we're going to kick off, I'm going to have Christian actually introduce Aaron Chu.
Thanks, Indu, and hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here, and thank you to ALS ONE and Jen DiMartino for helping us bring this all together and providing such a great platform to the whole community. And it's my pleasure now to talk a little bit and introduce Aaron Chu. She comes from Amazon Web Services, and medical and life science organizations are accomplishing everything that you're hearing about today through huge feats and investments in engineering and data science. And a huge amount of that computing power is in these cloud environments. And one of the leading companies providing that infrastructure is Amazon Web Services. AWS is working worldwide to expedite research and provide the infrastructure needed to help transform patient outcomes. And Erin is a huge part of that. She's the global lead for AWS Open Data, where she works with the research community to leverage the AWS cloud to make some of the world's most valuable public data resources available for research and development. Erin is a veterinarian and a molecular geneticist, and she's dedicated to speeding the time to science through interdisciplinary collaboration, communication, and learning. She's also an incredible voice for women in technology. She's got some really inspirational work done in that space. So really, it's an honor to have you here, Erin, and take it away.
Thanks, Chris. And I will just say that listening in for the past hour has just been fascinating for me. So thank you to the entire team for putting together such an incredible day, which is the last day of 3, I know. So let me see if I can share my screen, and I guess we can time how long it takes me to get it working. Chris, remind me again how much time I have.
15 minutes.
15 minutes. Oh my gosh. Okay. I thought we had like 6 minutes. So this is going to be incredibly short. Everyone can go take a bio break on me. So awesome. So
okay, but we have a panel after this. So
that's right. You'll be part of the panel.
Oh, shoot. Okay. All right. Well, you know what? We're just going to go with it and see what happens. Anyways, it's my pleasure to be here. Like Chris said, I am the global lead for AWS Open Data. So you've seen over and over again in the past few presentations, data is what fuels artificial intelligence and machine learning. And so I do come at it from a let's get all the data, let's make the data easier to use. But today I'm going to talk a little bit more about AWS's general offerings for enabling and accelerating innovation with AI, specifically around the healthcare and the life sciences space, which of course is my specialty and personal area of interest. I'm just going to very briefly talk about, what we offer, starting from our, workhorse of AI offerings, which is really Amazon SageMaker, all the way to the recent explosion of interest in generative AI. And then I'm going to focus in my last half of the talk on some use cases, which I find incredibly compelling and inspiring, and specifically things that we do with in collaboration with nonprofits like Everything ALS and the programs that we have that enable some of those workloads. So just keep in mind here, when I talk about how AWS is working towards accelerating AI ML, it is because we want to be providing our customers with the cheapest, easiest, and best way to run their AI workloads. We are an infrastructure company. And so when we talk about accelerating, I want you to do the work. I just want to make it easier for you. And our goal has always been to democratize machine learning by democratizing that infrastructure. So this is a great timeline. I mostly just like this timeline because I can't believe that SageMaker's been on the market for since 2017, to be honest. But really our advances in machine learning and our investments in machine learning started as early as 2002. And in the past decade, I would say that we've seen a massive rise in healthcare life sciences groups that are running their AI ML workloads on AWS. And in fact, currently, I believe 9 out of 10 pharma companies in North America do prefer AWS to use their to run their AI ML workloads. And why is that? Like I said, we've been investing in the infrastructure, SageMaker being a fantastic example, but we also have been investing in the best instances to power your AI ML workloads. We work with NVIDIA to make sure that people can get their high-powered compute as most available and most quickly on AWS. So one thing that I wanted to point out, like I said, Amazon SageMaker is kind of our workhorse for removing that undifferentiated heavy lifting. So SageMaker is pretty much where people start. But one thing I want to say, especially with the interest in generative AI, is that SageMaker Jumpstarts, you can literally just get started with some commercial or openly available foundation models that are provided by different folks. You might recognize some of the people here, but the nice thing is it's kind of a click and go experience. So you literally can try out a model using the console, and then if you really like it, you can deploy the model on SageMaker and you can make your changes all by yourself. So you can start with something that someone else has built, and you can then start to modify based on the licenses associated with that model and fine tune it. You could bring your own data, and you could even bring your own models if you wanted. Now, SageMaker is, let's say I want to call it our premium option for building. But one thing I do want to point out is that we do have a free option called SageMaker Studio Lab. So for those of you on the call who are interested in just getting started with machine learning, we want to make that as quick and easy for you as possible. And I've heard from a lot of nonprofits in particular, the barrier to entry, even just making an AWS account and entering a credit card, can actually be a blocker. So SageMaker Studio Lab, you don't need a credit card. You literally just make an SageMaker Studio Lab account, and you get some amount of time with either CPUs or GPUs over a 24-hour period to run your own models. So that's definitely something you should check out if you're, cloud curious, as some groups call it, or machine learning curious. Now, just because we do have this explosion of interest in generative AI, I did want to just point out that Amazon Bedrock is something that we offer, and it supports our leading foundation models. We do have our own Amazon Titan, but you can see other models here, LLM specifically, that are offered by other groups. So something to check out, and we have invested pretty significantly in our generative AI capacity and our ability to accelerate that work on AWS. And then, so I kind of started with, this is how you can build using SageMaker. This is how you can explore specifically foundation models. Now, for folks who are interested, just like I said, they're interested in just building a little bit. You're not really sure if you want to be running your workloads. You just want to experiment. I did also want to make a call out to Code Whisperer, which is super useful in a way for you to just check your code and make sure that you're not going to get too many hours spent debugging. Code Whisperer can improve your productivity significantly. So this is also AI enabled, and hopefully will make your work on AWS a little bit faster. Okay, so I've done all the general talks that, frankly, I don't find as interesting as talking about AI in the life sciences. So when we talk about artificial intelligence in the life sciences specifically, I mean, we have talked about specific examples up till now about speech recognition, which has just been so interesting for me. And I just want to zoom out, because when we talk about the patient journey from diagnosis to cure, or diagnosis to management to cure, potentially, we're talking about a million different things that AI could be leveraged in. So all the way from the research bench, and I'm a genomicist by trade, right? I'm a bench biologist. When we start talking about drug design, drug discovery, proteins are where we're starting, small molecules. But then if we wanted to move into clinical development, we could say, yeah, we could leverage AI for identifying the best research cohorts or reaching out to people. And then, of course, if you're going into the pharmaceutical area, of course, predictive maintenance, resource optimization, I think what's really most valuable here as well is how do we support our patients at the end of it, right? Applying AI to find a diagnosis is one thing. Leveraging AI to make our patients feel more supported, more educated, more cared for is, I think, what all of us care the most about. So, briefly, I wanted to show 3 examples, and my last one is probably my favorite, but this one is actually a Kendra-backed chatbot that specifically looks into outcomes for clinical trials. And this is one of the places that we're seeing AWS customers really leverage our services. I think probably chatbots and quick responses was the first and most popular use case that I saw AI/ML, I'd say, in the past few years. And so imagine being able to search a huge clinical trial data set and say, how many of these individuals had an adverse reaction to this drug and why? These are things that we're trying to enable instead of having you piece through the outcomes of a bajillion different clinical trials while taking into account variance in study administration and or incomplete metadata, et cetera. In R&D, this is incredible, and I think everyone knows about the recent advances and the 50-year problem with respect to protein folding and structure. So this was something that we're incredibly proud of. So not only do we have 9 modules to predict molecular properties of proteins using foundation models, we have something called a drug discovery workbench. So for those of you who kind of dabble in R&D or are working with folks who are working in that drug discovery space, I strongly recommend exploring this. The folks who built this workbench are incredibly talented, and this is where they are happiest. They'll talk about protein folding all day long. This is the one I wanted to chat about the most. So we are dedicated to enabling our customers, and that's not just pharma, it's not just startups, it's not just academia, it is absolutely our nonprofits. In fact, I'd say they're my favorite folks to work with, and I think Chris and Indu can attest to the dedication that we have to supporting our nonprofit customers. And so I wanted to tell a story about Who We Play For, which is a nonprofit that is dedicating to saving youth athletes from sudden cardiac arrest. Sudden cardiac arrest is one of the leading causes of death in young student athletes. And literally this nonprofit started because a friend of the founders literally just passed away suddenly on a soccer field. And later they found out that the reason he had passed was because of a very detectable cardiac arrhythmia. And if these individuals had been screened with what's called an electrocardiogram or an ECG, that his death might have been prevented. So Who We Play For started partnering with athletic programs worldwide, and they started bringing ECG equipment to these campuses, and they screened 250,000 student athletes. And they found abnormalities in over 200 of those individuals, meaning they saved those lives, those children's lives. Now, when they came to us, I'd say maybe it was 2 years ago, they said, hey, we've got way too much data for our experts to review, right? They had a handful of cardiologists who were doing this on the side to say, yeah, I think this is abnormal versus yes, or no, I don't think this is abnormal. So they came to us and said, can we apply AML to make the screening process better and faster? And so the first thing they did was they started to work with our Health Equity Initiative, which is a 3-year, $40 million investment from Amazon Web Services to provide credit, support, and technical expertise to enhance health accessibility and equity to the underserved and underrepresented individuals. And we engaged through the Health Equity Initiative and Amazon's professional services. So this infrastructure or architecture that you're seeing on the right here was actually built by 2 solutions architects who are leveraging Amazon SageMaker primarily, along with Amazon S3, to train a model based on several, I think it was tens of thousands of ECGs at the time. And what they found was that ultimately their model outperformed human review with respect to being able to detect cardiac abnormalities in ECGs. And in fact, there even identified, I think, 10 or 12 that had been misclassified by a cardiologist. So these folks are now working to say, hey, how can we make this architecture even more scalable so that they can deploy this into their practice and quickly be able to identify even more abnormalities and expand their program worldwide. So I took 12 minutes. So didn't make it to 5 or 6, but thank you, Indu, for having me.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for this great presentation. And we're going to kick off the panel discussion, and I'm going to invite Christian Rubio and Blair Casey to actually ask the questions. And we have, Amazon, Google, and Microsoft. We can't get any better. We have the top companies here, and we will ask the questions that does come our way.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, everybody, for all those great presentations. We got some really specific ones and also some great overviews as well. So I think it gave us a real 360-degree view of where we are with artificial intelligence and what it's doing in what people are doing in the community with it. So to talk a little bit more about how each of you envision your roles, your company's roles, the projects you're taking on, and helping meet the needs of researchers and people living with ALS, and to ensure it's used for good, which I think also was a recurring theme that it came up several times. Our presenters are going to join us now for this panel discussion. And so with that, I'm going to start with Bob, and then Aaron and Garfield, by all means, jump in. Bob, what lessons have you learned so far from the early years of working in AI?
Yeah, I'd like to highlight 2 or 3 points. One is that AI is, it's an incredibly powerful concept, in a sense, just like concepts like mathematics or, other branches of, science. But it actually doesn't, standing alone, provide any value or, usefulness to folks. So in my experience, really starting with a problem that you're trying to solve, a community that, that you'd like to benefit, some other kind of end use case is important to keep in mind, ideally, from the very beginning. Though obviously providing flexibility, as I mentioned, our original research thesis for Project Euphonia was related to drug delivery or drug development. And as we learned more, we started to focus on a related but quite different use case, which leads into the second point that people talk about data and big data as being key, and that's true, but the quality of the data and the nature of the data are incredibly important for being able to do that useful thing. At a minimum, for even just kind of being able to measure how useful is this model at trying to do the thing that I'm hoping it will be able to do. So whether it's speech recognition and the accuracy of that, whether it's voice synthesis and the authenticity of the speech that comes out, there's really no substitute for having really high quality, diverse, representative data that you've looked at through the lens of what you're trying to get done, versus just saying, oh, well, it's related to speech, so I'm just going to sort of casually try to build a data set that includes some speech samples. So starting with the end in mind of what is this useful thing that I want to create, then what kind of data is going to be most directly relevant and related to that. And then finally, I think it's really kind of partnerships, working with communities, individuals, organizations, because the way that you're going to succeed at the end of the day is only if there's sufficient trust and connection to those people who would be the ultimate beneficiaries. So those are some of the key findings from my experience, and love to hear perspectives from other folks involved.
Thank you. I think as we're closing in on well, we're a little short on time, so I'm gonna keep the I'm actually going to introduce another question for Garfield here, and we'll try to keep the clock moving. So in 1 minute, or if you have one specific that you raised, because several topics on this have been raised, what do you think most needs to be addressed with skeptics of AI? And kind of what do you think we need to champion or educate people on, if you had to pick one thing in particular?
Yes, so if I need to take one thing for particular to make sure that we can use AI to help more people, I think like we need more organization to be the bridge between the technology and the end user. So the organization here is a very important role, like what Team Gleason is very helpful here is like they are the gatekeeper from make sure that the information, the technology delivered to into the hand of someone who really need that, and also the one who will help us to identify what is the right use case, as like help us to streamline what is the very important need of the data format, and then what is the need from the end user perspective, what technology is very important, and how can we improve it in become a better process and implement that into our product development overall. So I would like to say the more organization like Team Gleason is very important.
That's a great point of how to partner with the right organizations to make sure you're getting the best use cases and best details built in that are really, really customer centric. And Aaron, I'm going to direct this one at you, and it's kind of the same thing. With AI becoming more available and providing so much infrastructure around the world, especially to so many nonprofits, how are you helping ensure that builders are building AI responsibly?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think all three of us have spoken a little bit to our efforts in making sure AI isn't just for everyone, it's responsible for everybody. So we actually have a responsible AI team at Amazon, and we build upon, ideally, right, we want to be sitting down with every customer and saying, hey, what are you actually building and how can we help you build it responsibly? That's not always scalable, but that is actually something you can request of our team. But probably things that you want to check out is our responsible AI on AWS page. And probably the coolest thing is the service cards associated with all of our AI services, kind of just saying, this is what the service is for. This is how you should use it. And here are some things you should keep in mind when you're using this data. Ultimately, we do subscribe to the shared responsibility model also with AI, right? we make sure that we give you as much data as we have about the services you're leveraging, but you also have to come to us for any questions or unsureness, uncertainties, and we're happy to help there. But we definitely have committed to responsible AI as an intrinsic part of our investments in building and in accelerating our customers.
Thank you so much. You're giving some great succinct responses, and so I want to move a little bit to kind of a more global topic as well. And Blair, by all means, jump in if you have a pointed question for anybody as well. But where do you see your companies and your AI efforts impacting communities like the ALS community in the near term and the longer term? I think everybody's given a little bit of a future state, but where do you think there's singularly a greatest point of pride and impact that you can make? You know what? I'll start with Garfield this time.
Oh, you're on.
Sorry, I'm muted. Yes, can you repeat again?
Sure thing.
I will. Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Where do you see, if you want to call out one thing in particular, again, where do you see your company and your AI efforts making the most impact, like with communities like the ALS community in the near term or longer term?
Yes, so in the current term, actually, we are trying to run some pilot project. It's like using our technology, going through, make sure all the AI, all the AI responsibility review and all security review can have a controllable size, like the pilot project which we're working with Blair right now. We're trying to identify around maybe 20 people, and then we will try to run to see what we can reach with our current offering. And this is the short term. We are trying to have a limited size of the set, and then with our technology already there, and we want to see how the user is going to use that in daily use and what is the real challenge and obstacle or difficulty they will face when they're using our technology into the daily life, because this is very different from your daily life and in the lab, or the people who like us, we just the normal people, we using the text to speech, like we just input text and it output audio. We think it's normal, it's just acceptable. But for people who rely on the technology heavily, the latency is very different concept between them, and then the pronunciation accuracy rate is very different on that concept. So we would like to run that, and then we collect the feedback, and then we put that into our whole product consideration. And then on the long term, we want to see that not only for the model improvement, to improve the quality, to improve the latency, to improve the naturalness of the voice, to improve the amount of data we can reduce that, but we also need to consider about how to make sure that the responsible AI and then the security part to be like very well protect, and then this solution should also be scalable to not only for ALS patient, but also for the other people who have the similar situation, like someone who have throat cancer or something like that, or also lost their voice, or someone who blind, they also need the other assistive technology in overall the as AI can trying to help.
Thank you, Garfield. Aaron, I know AWS has made some big investments in health equity grants and programs. So we've been a proud recipient and partner with you for that. So I wanted to give you a chance also to talk about any potential impact or direction you were taking with that fund as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Health Equity Initiative is probably one of our flagship impact funds, and it kind of speaks to a larger investment in what AWS wants to do in the long term with AI, which is to bring it to everybody, right? We want to democratize AI/ML, and how are we doing that? It's not just making sure that we have the most services that are the most available, but that no matter whether you're a 2-person nonprofit or a 1 million person pharma company, you have the ability to build on AWS. So the Health Equity Initiative is a great example of what we are trying to do. So this is application based. It's available to anybody to apply to, and you can apply for an amount of promotional credits towards a workload on AWS. Now, health equity is specifically there for, I think there are 3 research areas right now, all for advancing health accessibility and representation. In the larger research community. However, there are also grants like the Amazon Research Award, which is specifically focused around AI ML, and the Cloud Credit for Research program, which is specific for academics.
Thank you. Thanks so much. Really helpful, and we'll distribute information in case people are looking for more information about the program. And Bob, finally, you can bring us home. Thank you. Thanks to everybody, and please, closing thoughts on where you think the greatest impact is going to happen maybe in the near term or even globally in your work.
Yeah. So near term, I just double down on communication tools. And so, what about that am I optimistic about? So I'm optimistic that with improvements in the speech recognition and speech synthesis models and the accumulation of more diverse data, it'll just make those systems work better for people with ALS. You won't have to go through this process of training or collecting your old original voice or any of those things. That will be made dramatically easier in the next year or two. Longer term, I do kind of go back to the intervention at the biological. ALS is a biological phenomenon. Communication is impacted as a symptom of it, but if you can't get down to kind of the level of cure, and so I'm optimistic that tools like AlphaFold, where Google's DeepMind built a model that predicted like every protein known to humanity, that some of those fundamental, really scientific, molecular and cellular level innovations will end up being useful for organizations like Everything ALS and their associates to actually get to the root cause and get rid of this horrible disease.
Root cause, restoration, regeneration are all things that we want to see on the near future landscape for the ALS community. So Bob, thank you. Thanks everybody. Thank you, Blair. Thank you, Jen. And for everybody attending, we can't do this without you, and we can't do it without working together. So really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you. What a great morning. And I can't, thank all the information that you guys shared. And like you said, Bob, we've known about this disease for way too long. And now is the time. Now is the time, because a lot of things are happening. And for all of you guys to step up here with, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, Barracuda networks to share with this community, we are like really grateful and thank you from the bottom of our heart. So with that, we will take a lunch break, and I will pass it on to Jen to give us the agenda for the afternoon.
Thank you. Very, very big thank you to you, Indu, and your team. Such an engaging and really eye-opening session this morning. After listening to hopeful scientific presentations from the leaders in ALS clinical research over the past 2 days of the symposium on Thursday and Friday, it was truly incredible to hear the overwhelming progress that's also being made with regard to technology. And I don't think a lot of people know that. Technology to not only help advance science, right, but to also, and with equal importance or even more so, to help people living with ALS have the best quality of life possible. How do we do that in tandem? ALS takes so much away. So much away. We all know, we all have a reason that brought us to this very large table. And the only thing, as I was sitting here racking my brain, thinking back, what has been given back to them after taking everything away is technology. It's the ability to communicate. And that's incredibly special. Science will continue to work on giving back time, hopefully a lot of time, indefinite. And hopefully one day in the near future to give back mobility through regeneration and recovery, as Christian was saying. and we'll hear continued conversation about that. But when you can give something back like speech, we all watched the Jetsons, 100 years ago, and thought how crazy it was, all the things that they were doing that wasn't actually real, and now it's real. There are so many things that are happening, and I'm so honored to have worked on this important addition to our annual symposium for the second year now with all of you. Grateful for the time, talent, expertise, and passion that every speaker has brought to making it so engaging. We were founded in 2015 with one goal. Our founder, Kevin Gosnell, wanted one thing, and that was to just, bring people together, break down silos, open communication, open collaboration. And we have so much of that. A lot of people will say, you've heard it say, there's too many ALS organizations. I don't know how, that's a bad thing. How can that be possible? I say, we each have strengths. We each bring something different to the table. And look what's happening when we all come together. We're getting there. Years ago, we'd say, imagine if you could just do this. In some cases, as we heard from Roseanne earlier, we're there. We have many milestones to reach and mountains to get to the top of, but what's been done already has come from people working together. 56 years since between Lou Gehrig's speech and the first drug being introduced, and in the past 6 years, 4 more. And why is that? Technology, advocacy, determination, dedication, neuroscience, and neurotechnology. So thank you, Indu, Steffi, Christian, Kristen. It's been a joy to work with all of you, all of our speakers, Elad, Lyle, Blair, Bob, Garfield, Flemish, and Aaron. And thank you, Steve and Roseanne, for bringing your stories of courage and resilience. You're both in our hearts, and we're gonna continue to work together. And we'll hear from Doctors Shel Lalji and Leigh Hochberg at 1 p.m. Until then, I hope you all have a nice break.
Thank you, Jen. And just on the topic of everybody coming together, just in this today, we have Team Gleason, Everything ALS, ALS Heroes, and ALS ONE put this together. So
it's amazing.
This is the true, collaboration within our organization. So
it is. It's remarkable. Again, a lot of people say, oh, it's territorial, this and that. I think it's territory all. We all have to work together, and you're just, this is what you've done here, Indu. Incredible. So thank you all.
Thank you, Blair, my co-chair. So
yes.
Thank you, everybody.
Right. Have a great break.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Should have reminded her to stop the recording. I guess it will as soon as we're off, though.
Yeah.